Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. I'm Gavin Schall, and today I'm lucky enough to be joined by the host of the Locked On Pacers podcast, Tony East, to preview the team's upcoming matchup and talk through how the Knicks have gotten to where they are. Why are they so good all of a sudden? We get into it right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, and I'm your host, Gavin Schall. And I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day. We are now available on all platforms, and that includes on YouTube. So go throw us a like, go throw us a subscription if you would. That would be super beneficial. But yeah, who's talking to you? I already mentioned my name. I am your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. Typically, I'd be joined by Alex Wolf, editor-in-chief of the Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. He is off today, so instead, I am lucky enough to be hosted by. I highly, if you've never been on a podcast, I highly recommend it. It is fantastic. It is like walking into someone's apartment. They've invited you over for a dinner party, and everything is taken care of. They've prepared the questions. They know the chronology, or at least the planned chronology of the podcast. They're trying to make you feel comfortable. They're trying to make you laugh. It is like getting wined and dined to the greatest extent. So I'm hosted by Tony East, who is leading the way on this one, the host of Locked On Pacers, also covers the team for SI Pacers and at a whole bunch of other places, including Forbes. So certainly go check out all of his fantastic work. And without further ado, let's get into it, talking through how the Knicks have gotten so good all of a sudden. And if Tyrese Haliburton, after those Wally Serviak comments, will have some revenge on his mind, all of that right now on Locked On Knicks.
It's crossover time. He's Gavin Schall from Locked On Knicks. I'm Tony East from Locked On Pacers. And the teams play again tonight in New York in the Garden. Always fun to watch games in MSG. Gavin, what odds would you have given me before the season that the January 11th Knicks-Pacers game would be massively critical for playoff positioning and the winner would move into sixth in the standings in the Eastern Conference?
I gotta consult our friends at BetOnline. I don't know, like 30 to 1, 40 to it's like somewhere in there. Like I mean, I know no offense to obviously your fans listening, but I would have said the Pacers were slightly or moderately even more unlikely than the Knicks to be there. But the fact that they're both there is very exciting for both of them.
It is stunning that they are currently the teams battling for sixth, given their preseason expectations and how things have gone for both franchises this year. But the Knicks, the spunky Knicks, with Wally Serviak battling for the All-Stars over there.
We can't take credit for that on Locked On Knicks.
Hey, the Knicks changed their starting five in early December and have been a pretty dang good team ever since. I believe 6 losses in over a month now since
third in the league in net rating.
Wow. Some of those rotation changes. So talk to me about the present day Knicks, the last month of basketball we've seen from New York since they said, let's be spunky with these young guards.
Yeah, I think Deuce McBride and Quentin Grimes deserve a lot of credit for, I think, honestly, just changing the emotional state of this Knicks season. They're both bulldogs defensively. There's no other way to describe it. They get in your jersey for every single second that they're on the court. And Grimes in particular, I think just completely changed the complexion of their offense with not only his shooting, which has been fantastic, over 40%, I think something like 7 attempts per 36 minutes. He's getting them up. He's hitting them at a high rate, but also leads the NBA in blow-by rate since he joined the Knicks starting lineup. So he's added a little bit of electricity, a little bit of verve that they've needed. And in turn, I mean, I honestly, we were talking about a little pre-show. I can't fully explain what happened to Julius Randle, but it's almost like, I don't know if he discovered therapy, meditation, some form of religion, but it feels like his brain has been swapped out. He is a completely different person on the court and player, a guy who, I mean, I was just referencing last night in regard to the Bucks game, started 0 for 8 for 3. If he did that last season, the first 10 games of this season, you would have seen a guy who's completely disinterested, moping, and just generally bumming everyone out. And instead he played about as well defensively as you could against Giannis. Finished the game with 7 offensive rebounds. So when your best player is sprinting and making those type of extra effort plays time in and time out, I think it just revolutionizes what your team can be. Mitchell Robinson has been excellent on defense. It just feels like all the stars have aligned, Tony, in the best possible way for the Knicks.
Yeah, like you cover the Knicks. I barely watch them as much as you do, but Randle being engaged and good again has gone such a long way for them, right? Like when they were at their best 2 years ago, when they were the 4 seed, 5 seed, what were they in that Hawks series? The 4 seed, yes, they had home court advantage, but I forget because home court didn't matter that year. Randle being all NBA level was a big reason why, and then him not being that last year obviously was a big reason they took that step back. So to see him be more of the bowling ball bully that he was that year, he was, at least to me. And when he plays the Pacers, he's always like this, right? Like he just runs through people because they have no one tall enough to like get in with him and be physical. And him being that level of player has been huge for New York to me. And I'm curious for you, like, what is it? Consistency? Is it the engagement? Like what makes Julius Randle go on this toggle from all-star threatening physical beast to like totally disengaged finesse player?
It's mystifying. It felt like some of what happened last season was maybe a tiny bit of an assault to his ego, where the 2021 season was just so built for him to have success and that it was so Julius centric and there was no ambiguity in what he had to do possession to possession, right? He was the whole offense. It was essentially what LeBron was on the Cavs earlier in his career, just not nearly as successful or spectacular, but he had the ball every possession. He was either shooting or passing and in turn getting an assist or making the pass that led to the assist. Everything ran through him. And then the Knicks go out, they get Kemba Walker, they get Evan Fournier, RJ Barrett saying, hey, I'm ready to take another step. And there was a little bit of uncertainty introduced. And Julius was like, all right, am I supposed to pass a little bit more? Like, do I touch here? Do I be aggressive? And as that went badly and as he started shooting worse and as Knicks Nation sort of turned on him, and I mean, I hesitate to say this, but it does feel like he rested on his laurels a little bit and that he just wasn't in as good shape as he was the season before. Like everything sort of went down the drain and it felt like it wasn't necessarily any one thing, but as the on-court factors compounded, his attitude got worse and worse and worse. And it just turned into a destructive mess to the point that on my podcast, we talk about, I was willing for the Knicks to attach a pick to move off him. And I honestly, like to some extent, I stand by that stance, because he was just so utterly destructive to the morale of the team. And this year, it started off really well. The vibes were good. He was talking about how he watched Euro Cup or whatever they call it now, like this summer, and was like, yeah, you know, they really like to pass the basketball. I'm going to try doing that. He's making quick passes, quick decisions. It was great. And then it kind of bogged down again. And he just really struggled defensively for a while, mostly due to inattentiveness and disinterest. The shot wasn't really falling. And then something flipped with his new lineup. He's taking more threes than literally anyone in the NBA over the last month. He's getting to the rim. He's realized he's a complete physical force. And it is just completely flipped who he is as a player. And honestly, I would say he's playing quite a bit better right now than he did during that 2021 season.
Wow. Yeah, he's definitely at a high level with the scoring right now. And from the outside, of course, like I always think that if there's one guy in a lineup at all times who's like diving for every loose ball and up in your face and screaming, and like everybody's going to do it, because you don't want to be the guy who's like wasting his effort, right? So like, you talked about the bulldog mentality of those two young guards in Deuce, and I somehow don't have the names in front of me anymore. But either way,
Grimes. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Quentin Grimes. How that has changed the Knicks, like that in turn changes everybody, right? And on the biggest scale, I always talk about this with the Bucks, because like Giannis for a superstar, like he gives a lot of effort, as you just saw Monday night, right? Like if you're another player in the Bucks, like you have to, you know, if Giannis is doing it, you're doing it, and obviously, with two younger guards, it's a little different. But when other guys are giving it or busting their butt, like you have to, you can't relax. And I think that has been big for the Knicks. But hey, listen, point guard play is very important in the NBA, and the Knicks got a huge upgrade at that position this season. Brunson with 40 plus on Monday night. I mean, we could talk about internal improvements and lineup changes all we want. How much of their season to season improvement is because, oh my God, we have good point guard play now?
All right, guys, we'll be back with Tony in just a sec to talk about how Jalen Brunson has transformed this Knicks roster. But first, I got to tell you about our friends over at PrizePicks. Tonight, I think I'm going to take Jalen Brunson over 23.5 points. I'm going to take Emmanuel Quickly over 4.5 assists. I'm going Mitchell Robinson over 1.5 blocks. He's due for a big shot blocking game. It has been a little while. So how does PrizePicks work? All you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players, and if they go score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. And the beauty of it is, on a lot of these other sites, you're competing against I want to think of a nice way to phrase it, but I can't. Some weirdos who live in their mom's basement and just pour hundreds to thousands of hours every month into doing this. And I'm sorry, unless you're one of those people, you're not going to beat those people. PrizePicks, the beauty is you just go up against the projections, and entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They offer projections in just about any sport you watch. They have safe and fast withdrawals, and they're currently operational in over 30 states in Canada. So all you have to do is download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. So don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Yeah, it makes a world of difference as it turns out. And I mean, anyone who's followed the Knicks for a long time, or even from afar, they haven't had point guard play like this since Stephon Marbury around 2004 when I was first getting into the NBA. And then there was a blip of Raymond Felton and 75-year-old Jason Kidd, like bringing some competency and some stability. But
this is making me sad.
Point, yeah, no, I mean they were hopeful. They thought they were going to get something like this with Kemba last year. Turns out he was past his last legs. And Jalen has made an incredible difference. Even on nights where he's not shooting well, he draws so much attention that he just makes everyone else's lives so much easier. And I mean, you want to talk about another boon for Julius's game. It's weaponized him as an off-ball rim runner. And I mean, even last night, there's a play where Drew Holiday fell asleep and Randle just back cut in. And it brings a level of activity to the offense. And people like they can, there's like a certain centrism to having that point guard. And 2 years ago was Randle, but honestly, it was too much for him. And it was too much responsibility for him with Brunson, unlike Kemba, actually like capably taking the reins and kind of leaving like, all right, there's no like ambiguity over like who should be running the team. It is Jalen Brunson. That's freed Julius to do what he does best. That's freed RJ Barrett to do what he does best. That frees Quentin Grimes instead of attacking a static defense, there's a defender desperately sprinting out to go get to him. And he's like, all right, I'm going to blow right by you. It just makes everyone else's jobs that much easier, Tony. And on top of that, he is, I don't know, one of the 5 to 10 most skillful scorers on planet Earth. Like I outside of Kyrie, like I can't remember a point guard with as deep of a bag. I mean, obviously Steph, but it just in terms of his variety, like it is pretty unique what he can do in terms of how he scores the basketball.
Yeah, lit up the Pacers for 30 less than a month ago. You know, his mid-ranger just adds so much to his game because then you have a counter for everything, right? They cut you off at the rim and the three-point line. Great, I can still score and be capable, and that was a big part of why he was so successful in that win in Indiana. And the whole Knicks starting 5 was pretty good in that game, if I remember correctly. Look, the Knicks beat the Pacers in the preseason and the regular season, but these teams have been close. I think every Pacers-Knicks game for the last 6 years has been like a 5-point game. That's probably not true, but it feels that way.
No, I think it's emblematic of the incredible Sabonis Julius Randle rivalry that we've now lost. Like that to me, like that's why the games felt epic, right? But it's like, oh, the two titans of the East going at it once again.
Does no one outside of the Knicks or Pacers sphere know about the lefty battle that was Randle versus?
There's no way literally anyone else on earth cares at all.
That's like the least. It's not even a rivalry. It's like the least discussed thing in the NBA that they always would play well against each other. I will never forget the Sabonis coming out party against the Knicks when he did not miss a shot and had 30 in the Garden. Look, brutal. The Pacers are talented enough to beat the Knicks, even though they didn't this season. But what type of player has done well against the Knicks this season? Do the Pacers have one that can do well in this game?
Yeah. Oh, interesting question. I mean, this is literally the most generic answer I could give you, but the Knicks have struggled against MVP candidates this year. Jonathan Macri over at Knicks Film School, like literally wrote it out, like the 10 guys you could viably consider MVP candidates, and the Knicks were, I think, 0-12 against them. And that continued last night against Giannis and the Bucks. And there is something to the idea. And this is honestly similar to their weakness 2 years ago, where Trae Young went off against them in the Hawks series, where they have multiple really, really good players, but they don't have anyone quite in that tier. And down the stretch of games, there is, I thought last night was actually a little bit better against the Bucks, where they got Jalen Brunson going towards the rim with some quick hitters. But generally, there's a distinct lack of creativity in the Knicks offense. And in turn, they've given up, particularly late in games, and they've given up a lot of big leads because Julius Randle tends to shine really bright in the first quarter. I think he's still top 5 in the NBA in first quarter points per game, had something like 18 2 nights ago against Toronto. But he tends to like fade a little bit over the course of games. And even for Brunson, as good as he is, like sometimes like it's a little bit harder for him to get off his shot in the fourth quarter. And the Knicks just don't have a lot of good options because there isn't like a baked in offense or a pet set that they can go to get an easy shot for someone. And in turn, another team that has a guy that you can throw it to and say, all right, either he's getting a bucket or he's drawing 2 or 3 defenders and kicking it out to a wide open 3-point shooter. Those teams just down the stretch of games tend to punish the Knicks. And it's a situation where either the Knicks just barely hold on or they give up a lead in some crushing fashion. Everyone saw the Dallas game. I mean, before that, it was 4 missed free throws against Chicago and DeMar DeRozan hitting big shot after big shot. So I guess the question I throw back at you, Tony, is Tyrese Haliburton that guy?
Ironically, their loss against the Knicks was a turning point because he missed that 3 over Julius Randle late and beat himself up over it. They had lost like 3 or 4 clutch games in a row at that point. And since then, they fell to 15-16. I said on the record, I don't think they get back over 500 this season. Whoops, that wasn't right. He after that game, it's all clicked for them. In the clutch, and Haliburton has become the guy that everybody's like, oh, wow, and immediately was clutch, and they went in Boston over the Celtics, and then 2 nights later, 43 in Miami. Like this was all right after the Knicks game. So in a clutch setting, yes, he is now that guy more so than he was when they lost to New York. His stats since that loss against the Knicks, 22.7 points per game and 9.2 assists on 50, 45, 91 splits. Pretty good. Is he that guy like MVP level? No. But is he that guy like all-star level? Yeah, he's an all-star level player. So he's very good. And he can tear up teams, right? 43 against the Heat's defense is really impressive. Like even in that game, he had a double-double against the Knicks. Like I think he'll do well, especially because he remembers every game he played poorly. And I don't think he played poorly against the Knicks, but the way he acted after missing that 3 over Randle, a shot that he really wanted, I don't know if sulked is the perfect word, but similar to sulked a little bit right after the game. And he never is like that. He's a very upbeat guy. So I think he'll have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, and every player in the NBA has got the MSG sheen, right? They want to do well in the Garden. So I don't know if he's like the level of player that fits the criteria that, Matt Green described that you were talking about, but I think he is good enough to do well against the Knicks.
Yeah, he. I assume after the aforementioned Wally Serviak comments,
yes, that is certainly a factor.
There'll be a little extra motivation there, and honestly, it's a great challenge for a Jalen Brunson, who is just fresh off torching Drew Holiday a night ago, and then Drew came back and hit some big shots down the stretch. So there have been some great point guard battles in MSG. Brunson's kind of the perfect candidate because he's unstoppable offensively, and it's very plausible for you to score on him defensively. So that should be a heck of a matchup.
I can't believe I didn't even think about the fact that this is the first Knicks game since Wally Szczerbiak said that. Like, if that will actually play into his thinking at all. It's not like he looked up to Wally Szczerbiak as a kid. It's like beating himself up over it. But I'll be curious how that actually shakes out for Tyrese, who has definitely he had 1 point against Miami in a game earlier this season, worst game of his career per him and Buddy Hield. And he needed 43 against them the next time they played the Heat. So we'll see how much he carries that. Gavin, I told you about this before we started recording, but something I've been doing when I do these crossovers with other hosts is talking about team building, because the Pacers said before the season, we're doing a new long-term approach to team building. This is a new era. And I wanted to get a feel for what every team in the league did really well rebuilding. And if it's something the Pacers can emulate, or if there was a lot of luck involved, like a salary cap spike or an unrepeatable trade sort of situation. Now, the problem is the Pacers are good. And so they might have changed their timeline or moved it forward a little bit, which is understandable given that you already have an all-star on your team. But from your perspective, I'm still curious and going to do this exercise all season because the Pacers' best 2 players are 22 and 20 years old. From your perspective, what did to getting the Knicks to where they are right now, right? A threat in the East, a playoff threat for 2 years in a row, had home court advantage in the East 2 seasons ago. What did the Knicks do well and poorly building their current team? And are the things they did well repeatable by other franchises?
All right, guys, we'll be back with Tony one final time to tell you if Tyrese Haliburton has revenge on his mind against the New York Knicks after some comments from a certain Knicks analyst. I won't say more than that. But first, BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and the World Cup. We've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, and that includes the latest NBA odds. Tonight, the Portland Trailblazers 7-point favorites over the Orlando Magic. That's a little rich for my blood. I think Orlando keeps it close, so I would throw some money down on Orlando in that one. All you have to do is head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And today's episode is also brought to you by MSG. What's up, Knicks Nation? As the new year gets underway, now is the time to start planning your visit to the Mecca of basketball, Madison Square Garden. Start off the new year strong with Knicks basketball. There's some massive games this month. Donovan Mitchell returns to the Garden. The atmosphere is sure to be electric. And then LeBron and the Lakers come into the town to wrap up the month. That is significant. Look, we have no idea how much longer LeBron can play at this level. If you want to see him at MSG, greatest player of all time, greatest arena of all time, there's only one place to do it. So be there to catch the action live and cheer on the Knicks. Knicks fans bring the passion and energy and make it a true home court advantage. There's no experience in the world like watching a game at the world's most famous arena. You need to be here to experience top-tier competition at the Mecca of basketball, Madison Square Garden. Get tickets at Knicks.com/lockedon today. So I think the biggest key is signing like quote unquote good but not great free agents to reasonable contracts, which is Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson, and especially free agents that fit that tier that are in their early to mid 20s and saying, hey, in a different role, in a different context, there could be some growth here, right? Julius came off the Lakers where there was just a million guys, and it was always sort of a mess while he was there. Obviously missed his whole first season due to a broken leg. And then New Orleans, where he was playing with Anthony Davis, which is great, but it's also that's a little bit of a little bit of a weird fit, right? Like, especially looking back at it now. And that move looked terrible after the first year, and then it looked great the second year, and then it looked terrible again the third year. Now it looks great again. So who knows what year 5 has to bring. Well, super excited for it. The trend is not good, but right now it looks really, really good, Tony. And then same thing with Jalen Brunson, where there was this chirping, probably not from smarter basketball minds, but certainly from some segment of the internet that said, wow, the Knicks overpaid for Jalen Brunson. LOL, $100 million for Jalen Brunson. Guess what? The guy is maybe possibly an all-star this year and would be incredibly deserving of that. I said it before, I'll say it again. Just about as skillful as any guard, maybe not named Kyrie Irving in the NBA. Incredible player. And the Knicks got both, honestly, with the way the salary cap is heading, like especially, and then with the Randle extension on relative discounts. So that is one for making a quick improvement, and two, just exceptionally good drafting. Similar to the Memphis Grizzlies, and just unfortunately not at the same volume, just because this front office hasn't been there as well. But Quentin Grimes, 25th pick, Emmanuel Quickly, 25th pick, both, I think, high-level rotation players. I would go so far as to call them elite role players. Obviously, with Quickly, you got to monitor the shooting. It has really fluctuated, but since RJ Barrett went out after getting clawed to death nearly by Luka Doncic, Quickly's been averaging something like 42 minutes per game or somewhere around there, and has been really, really, really good. Has kept his turnovers down, has made good decisions, is shooting the ball much better, and has certainly found himself. While Grimes just flat out is going to be in the NBA, I think, for 12 to 14 years. That would be a bold bet for anyone. I really don't think it is for Quentin Grimes, because he is tailor-made for the modern NBA, does everything you want outside of being a superstar at the shooting guard position. And those were late picks. Deuce McBride, second round pick. Jericho Sims, third to last pick in the draft. Potentially their backup center the rest of the way if Isaiah Hartenstein keeps not playing super well. So I think the combination of those two things, as far as things that they could have done better, I think it is self-awareness. Because coming off the 2021 season,
can I answer it myself into something they should have done better?
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
The 2022 draft, they should have done better. Okay, carry on.
Yeah, that's reasonable. We'll see what happens with those picks. I would have loved Jalen Duren as the backup center in Mitchell Robinson. That would have been the Knicks technically picked him, but anyways.
Do you have a Knicks hat on in any pictures?
I don't know. I can't remember the timeline with the trades there, but yeah, that one is gonna age. And look, they didn't really need a center, but just as a talent play, that one's gonna age poorly. But
Yeah.
I think self-awareness is the big thing. Is after that 2021 season where they made the 4 seed, got swept, they were sort of like, all right, let's double down on this, right? Let's see how good we could be. And to be fair, they kind of tried to do the same thing this offseason and just did it more successfully. But that offseason, it was Evan Fournier, it was Derrick Rose, it was Nerlens Noel, it was Alec Burks. And again, none of those signings were bad in a vacuum. The Knicks gave themselves a team option in the final year of all those contracts. So initially we were kind of apoplectic at all those deals. And then we looked at them and we're like, all right, like they can get out of this here, they can get out of this here. But essentially none of those deals aged particularly well. I mean, Fournier in particular is, if not an albatross, especially because of how short his contract is, a guy who will be out of the rotation when everyone on the Knicks are healthy. But to the front office's credit, they didn't totally tie themselves down to any of those guys. All those contracts have proved to be relatively movable. So I think overall you have to give the front office a pretty good grade. I guess the final step of that would be the questioning, all right, is good enough? And have they left themselves room to have a higher ceiling? Which, Tony, I'm curious what the Pacers' perspective on that is, because you guys have sort of put yourselves into a similar position where coming into this year, you had the really high ceiling move of, all right, maybe we get Scoot Henderson. Maybe we get Victor Wembanyama. And it feels like the Pacers in finding Tyrese Haliburton as a probably longtime all-star and finding Benedict Mathurin as someone who could join him in that category in a couple of years, they're set to be really, really good for a long time. But that's sort of always been the question in Indiana, right? They're never bad. They're rarely even mediocre, but will they be great?
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. But to talk about what the Knicks did well, I think they're an underrated drafting team for sure. And looking back at the game they played against the Pacers last month, 7 of the 9 guys they have in the rotation, the Knicks picked themselves, right? That is super impressive. Even with the Pacers having a lot of recent draft picks, they didn't pick them themselves. Nesmith, Haliburton, Jalen Smith, they're former lottery picks. Obviously, there's a good chance they'll turn out to be useful players, but the Pacers did not specifically draft those guys themselves. That's not that they don't deserve credit for acquiring them, but the Knicks in particular, Barrett, Robinson, Grimes, Quickly, McBride, and Sims all play against the Pacers, right? All drafted by the Knicks in recent years. They've done a good job of that. And that's the biggest takeaway with many of these questions I've asked the people is hey, if you draft well, it's the easiest way to get good players.
Yeah, smart move.
You have to give up.
Everyone should do it.
Yeah, everybody should everybody wants to be Memphis, right? You brought them up specifically, but even the Pacers said this summer, we looked at what the Grizzlies did. It's okay, they drafted perfect. They've literally drafted perfectly for 4 years, and that's hard to do. And hard to repeat, quite frankly. But if it works, guess what? You're set for a long time because of restricted free agency. Look, the Pacers right now are definitely better than they thought they would be, especially after the way they were talking in the offseason. But you also have a guy and maybe 2 guys, and you probably need a third guy to be really, really good someday. And that's where I'll be curious how their plans change. Because if you are thinking long term and you thought you would be bad this year, you thought you'd have a chance at a top. Name your number pick, 7, 8, 6, 5, where you're getting your shot at your third guy. Now you don't have that unless something awful happens in the second half of the season. So, how do you get that guy now? What is the method to do so? And is that doing what the Knicks did and finding a way to get one of those, I don't know, B level, B plus level, A minus level guys on a good deal? Is it a great trade, which is something the Pacers front office excels at? I don't know. But that is definitely their next step. And I think the Knicks do have some repeatable qualities about what they've done. Well, the problem for the Pacers is when I ask Lakers people, Clippers people, Nets people, Knicks people, it's they look, the Knicks can get a star if they want. The Pacers can't. It's the NBA. We all know the big difference. And there's a reason that there's a different reason that the 2 teams would prioritize flexibility and cap space. How about that?
Yeah, that is reasonable. Though the Knicks, to be fair, for the last 25 years have tried and mostly struck out getting genuine already stars in free agency. So it's tough for everyone outside of maybe LA.
Yeah, that is true. I guess they traded for Melo, right? And they drafted Ewig. And so, I guess that's true. They haven't. Well, the Sheen exists.
Amari for 30 games was honestly, that was pretty much it.
That doesn't count.
It was great. No, it was a great 30. One of the highlights of my childhood. It was a great 30 games.
Oh gosh, okay. I have to include this at the end. This is mostly for my listeners. Do Knicks fans view the Roy Hibbert block on Carmelo as a turning point in the same way that Pacers fans view it as an ascension playoff point?
It forced me to go to therapy, so it was a turning point for me. But yeah, no, it was. I don't know if it was a turning point. Alex and I were just my co-host on Locked On Knicks. We're literally just talking about this. We're like, all right, they probably wouldn't have beaten the Heat anyways, right? And that was the big bat. But the thing is, like, you kind of need, like, it needs to be a little bit fluky for a team without like a ton of star power. Like the model, I think, was sort of Toronto in 2019, where Kawhi had to hit that crazy shot just to get out of the second round, and he did it. And then they went on and it took a bunch of injuries for Golden State, but that happens once every 5 times you get to the finals. And if it's the time that you get there, you could be a franchise with just one star, right, and a bunch of other good players and kind of push your way through and kick down the door and win it. And you do that, you're in the history books forever. So that was kind of the model, I think, for that team, for that Knicks team. But that whole series was sort of their, like, they were too old, was kind of the takeaway. But yeah, that block was certainly, if I have an image, a negative one seared in my mind from that season, it is that block.
Yeah, look, the Pacers pushed the Heat to, was that the 7 year or the 6 year? Either way, they did well enough that I think the Knicks could have done something. I don't know if they could have beat them, but they could have done something. You never know. Gavin, I guess we're running this on both of our shows. You don't have to plug where you are to my listeners necessarily, but where could people follow you and the work you do covering the New York Knicks?
Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, which you should be, you can see right on the screen. It's at Locked On Knicks, personal Twitter, reloading soon, I promise. But yeah, check me out there. I will also occasionally tweet out, well, not on that account, but on a future personal account, we'll tweet out links to. I'm also play-by-play broadcaster, so I'll tweet out links to that. But please go subscribe on YouTube for. I promise we'll do like maybe an oral history of Sabonis versus Randle at some point, just to entice some Pacers fans to come over. But Tony, thanks so much for having me. This was great. And in turn, since we're putting this up on Locked On Knicks, can you tell everyone where they can find all of your work?
Yes, of course, covering the Pacers for many places over at TEastNBA on Twitter, where all the links will be in one place, including the Locked On Pacers podcast, where you can get daily coverage about the somehow 6-seeded Indiana Pacers halfway through the season. I keep saying somehow compared to preseason expectations, but they're clearly good. They are clearly a good basketball team. And this game's going to be super fun. And we'll, of course, on our respective shows, be breaking it down on Thursday, so you won't want to miss that. Everybody, thank you so much for listening to Locked On Knicks and Locked On Pacers. We will see you soon.